Joining us on the line now is an immigration lawyer, Adrian Arias. He is with us. What is going on, Adrian? Thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's clarify. When we're talking about these folks that got deferred action, that's DACA. That means they may have grown up in the United States. They speak English well. They can read traffic signs. They've probably been driving other types of cars. That's one thing. But when we talk about asylum seekers, many of whom were let in with an app under the Biden administration, some of those didn't really qualify for asylum. So it sounds like President Trump here is just trying to start over with all of this. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that what Trump is doing is now he's trying to enforce, the regulation. As many may know, or maybe that you all don't know, so CDL licenses are regulated by the Department of Motor Vehicles as well as the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and so there are certain requirements that need to be met. Knowing how to read signs, in English, especially if you're in the United States, is definitely one of them. And among other things, right? You also have to have valid lawful status here in the U.S. And so these regulations weren't really regulated, right? And so a lot of individuals that are on the roads right now, are given these CDL licenses, and they're not able to. And mind you, this is Trump's argument that they're not able to, do simple things like read signs and causing accidents. And so that's what pushed him to release this new law.
So what's it going to take, Adrian? We're talking to immigration attorney Adrian Arias. When's the push come to shove moment? We thought we had seen that with accidents across the country, some very spectacular. The guy that made the U-turn and, just had no clue that you don't make a U-turn in the middle of the freeway and had people in a deadly crash. And it's like they identify the problem, and then we get into this political, well, Trump says this, and then if you're Gavin Newsom, you fight back. It seems pretty kind of a no-brainer here. So what's it going to take to be the wake-up call that says, okay, let's totally revisit this. Let's fix it for public safety?
Yeah. You know what? And that's a good question. I don't think that I think what Trump does is that he blames a lot of these things. Like if there's an immigrant who has a CDL license and he happens to get into an accident for whatever reason, he kind of uses that as ammo to go after, all immigrants, right? At the end of the day, CDL licenses, whatever regulations there are under those laws, it should apply equally to everyone. Whether you're an immigrant that has a CDL license or whether you're someone who was born in the United States who has a CDL license. I don't think that we need to come at all immigrants when we're doing that. I think that some good things to offer might be, if someone causes an accident for whatever reason, maybe take extra classes, whatever it may be, but it should apply across the board, right? I don't think that we should target immigrants just because it happened to be an immigrant who caused an accident, right?
Shouldn't, though, because I see your point. Like, I don't think it's necessarily just because somebody is here and they're not a citizen of the United States. There's a lot of legal people here, right? And there's a lot of truck drivers that are here legally, and they're not Americans, but they're here legally, and they're driving legally, and they're driving fine. But there is an issue because if you or I went to another country and we couldn't read the road signs, we would be in big trouble if we got into an accident. There is an issue where, because so many people were let across during the last administration, where it was, I see your point. We don't necessarily need to overcorrect, but we also kind of undercorrected in the last administration. And there's people out there, and because even here in California, it's been found that there was corruption in the DMV, that some of these people in the truck driving schools were being passed because they were getting a check for it. And so there really are people on the road, and it's not their immigrant status that makes it so, but it is around the immigration issue where there's people profiting off of putting people on the road and putting people in danger that should not be driving because they haven't met those standards that you talked about.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. I think that those standards need to be met across the board. And some of the things that we've seen, for example, are like individuals who are here lawfully, right? They have a work permit through any specific immigrant process, and then that, let's say that work permit is valid until 2027, but the CDL licenses are issued until 2028. That's a lot of the things that we're seeing in California. And so it shouldn't be like that, right? Because the argument is that if your work permit, expires in 2027, then your CDL license should also expire in 2027. And so, yes, I agree. There's been a lot of corruption. There's been a lot of issues going on with the issuances of these CDL licenses. And so I think that this new law is also, rectifying those issues that we're seeing.
It does appear, though, that there are a lot of people who've been involved in horrendous accidents. It just happen to be people who have come here from other countries to have a better life. I get all of that, but maybe fast-tracked, maybe didn't get just to be kind, the most thorough check. I can't think of anybody who is not here from another country that's been in the middle of these accidents. Have you? Because it seems to me when you say, well, Trump will just blame all immigrants. I think that can be debated. But it does seem like if the shoe fits on some of this stuff, then aren't we dancing around this to a deadly possibility by just not fixing the problem?
Yeah, but, you also have to consider the nature of the job, right? Whenever you think of immigrants, when you think of jobs like constructions, you think of things like agriculture, you think of things like CDL, drivers. Majority of those in the U.S., whether we want to admit it or not, are immigrants, are, individuals that are not, weren't born here in the U.S. And that's a lot of the reason why is because, people here don't want to do those jobs. They don't want to take those things on. And so that's why we see a big influx of immigrants are the ones causing these accidents, because those are the individuals that are attracting those jobs. So we can't necessarily say that, you know what I'm saying? So we have to take that into consideration as well, I can guarantee you that, all those buildings that Trump has around the world, it was immigrants who built those, you know what I'm saying? And he wasn't complaining then when they were building his, those buildings and stuff. So,
they weren't immigrants. They were in their own country, and that they weren't necessarily immigrants. They were in their own country and other countries around the world. I think, though, that and to Mark's point, there's I don't think there's anybody complaining about somebody who comes here from, I don't know, name a country, South Korea, becomes a truck driver and gets there through all the standards that they should get, and maybe they're not quite yet a citizen or whatever. I disagree that Americans don't want to be truck drivers. I mean, I've got two nephews, both are long-haul truckers.
They read street signs?
They have perfect safety records. But we do have an example in Oklahoma where they did a sting and they arrested over 100 people that were here, and most of them were actually illegal. They were here illegally, and they tested them, and they could not read normal roadside. So that is a problem, and if we ignore that problem and let it go, we have a dangerous situation on our roadways.
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with you. I think that, we need to be strict when it comes to regulations for individuals that are going to be given CDL licenses. You and I can both agree on there. I think that, putting such a high blame on immigrants is where, I kind of have a little bit of an issue. If it shouldn't even be mentioned. CDL licenses.
Let me just
it shouldn't be mentioned.
Let me just interrupt real quick, because I want to expound on your point. Like I want to give you an opportunity to clarify this, but the reality is that if you're coming to our country from another country, just the same as if I immigrated to Italy, okay, I would struggle with the Italian language at the outset. Doesn't that mean there's a higher propensity for somebody from outside the country that doesn't understand the language, the culture, how we drive, the driving rules? There's a higher propensity for them to have an accident. We're not saying, and I don't even think Trump is saying, because Trump has a long record of working with immigrants. We're not saying it's the fact that they're an immigrant that's causing this per se. We're saying that there's a higher likelihood that someone who comes here from another country, doesn't speak our common language, can't read our common signs. If you give them a CDL, you're clearly not holding them to that standard, because if we were holding them to that standard, just statistically, there ought to be a lot fewer of them on the road, just by the nature that they probably don't speak English as well, and they probably can't read the signs as well. If they take the time to learn that, get a license, fine, if they're legal.
Yeah, but, okay, let's say, for example, what about DACA, though? Like you mentioned, DACA individuals have been here since they were young. Probably like 90% of them, if not all, know the English language really well, can probably read road signs. Why are they being penalized from being able to apply for these benefits?
I concede that point to you, because DACA's completely different issue, and I can see that. We've got to run, unfortunately. We got time, but Adrian, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts. We appreciate it.